Let's talk about photosynthesis. Let's start here. So we are zoomed into a chloroplast. So let me draw you a map of where we're at. Here we go. Okay. There's the outer membrane. And let me draw, let me draw an outer membrane, and then that's the inner membrane. And then we have the thylakoid membrane in here. If we zoom in on this thylakoid membrane, that's what this is right there, okay? So stuck in that thylakoid membrane is a whole series of proteins, these complexes of proteins all working together like a factory, like a production line, okay? And there's lots of different things going on in here. So what this entire thing is, it's known as a light harvesting complex. That's what this purple part is, right? This outer part. It's called a light harvesting complex. These include pigments, a lot of protein and other parts that harvest light. They absorb light. So this is going to be like chlorophyll, A and B, and your carotenoids, okay? Then inside of this light harvesting complex is this blue part here, known as a reaction center complex. And you put both of these together and what you have is known as a photosystem. Okay, so photosystem. This whole thing's a photosystem. The outer part is a light harvesting complex. The inner part is a reaction center. Inside the reaction center are two special chlorophyll A molecules, often called the reaction center. Okay, these are two chlorophyll A molecules like they show there side by side, and then there's another structure up here which is a electron, or the primary electron acceptor. I usually just write EA, electron acceptor, to point out what that is. All right, so what's going on? Photon, which is a particle of light essentially, smacks into these let me change colors here, smacks into those light harvesting complexes, so these pigments. They absorb light. Then that energy is transferred. We've talked about redox reactions and transfer of energy. Well, this energy is transferred from one of these molecules to another and directed at this special pair of chlorophyll A molecules, the reaction center. The same thing's happening over here. All of these things are gathering sunlight energy and kind of pointing it towards this reaction center, almost like a bunch of magnifying glasses aimed at that reaction center, pushing that light energy into that special pair of chlorophyll A molecules. I like to think of them as an antenna. They're like an antenna picking up a TV signal and directing it to the chlorophyll A. They're picking up light in this case rather than a TV signal, right? Okay, so if we look here, here's the thylakoid membrane. Down here is the thylakoid space, that like pocket inside the thylakoid, and out here is the stroma. We have this series of molecules all stuck together, harvesting light, and the chlorophyll A molecules are absorbing light. And what happens is they have electrons that get really excited by all the light they're absorbing. This reaction center does, and those electrons eventually get so excited they shoot off of these molecules, and that's what this arrow represents. And they go to the electron acceptor, the primary electron acceptor. So those electrons get all excited and then pew, they shoot up and they get caught by an electron acceptor. So I have a series of questions from your guided reading. When an electron is lost from photosystem 2, where does it go? We haven't talked about photosystem 2 yet, but these are things you'll be able to answer here very shortly. I'll let you pause the video and look at those. So there are two different photosystems in the plant. Photosystem 2 comes first. I'm sorry about that. I can't control it. It was discovered second. So they called it photosystem 2. Photosystem 1 is second. And they're both really similar, except the reaction center molecules, those chlorophyll A molecules, in photosystem 2 are known as P680, meaning they absorb 680 nanometers wavelength of light the best. Whereas in photosystem 1, they absorb 700 nanometers wavelength. So it's called P700. Okay, so they're slightly different. They absorb slightly different wavelengths of light better. All right, there's a lot going on in this diagram, so let me just introduce you first to the fact that water, well, let me not worry about water first. So all this light energy is captured by these pigment molecules, chlorophyll A and B, and their energy is directed to the reaction center molecules in the reaction center complex. Electrons are lost and they go to a primary electron acceptor. Okay? Then there's a series of molecules, just like we saw in the mitochondria. It's a electron transport chain. Those electrons go down the transport chain and they pump hydrogen just like in the mitochondria, and ATP is made. Then those electrons have lost a bunch of energy and they go to photosystem 1, where they stick to the reaction center. Then more light is added and they gain energy again and they go to an electron acceptor. And then they come down here and they get stuck to a molecule called NAD+, and that makes NADPH. NADPH is the electron shuttle, the electron carrier in photosynthesis. Okay? So in respiration it was NADH or FADH2. In photosynthesis it's NADPH. Think of the P as letting you know it's part of photosynthesis. Meanwhile, this reaction center way over here is lonely. It needs more electrons. It gets them by oxidizing water. Water is split. That releases oxygen gas, and it steals 2 electrons from that water, and it replaces its lost electrons. So we constantly fuel this reaction by adding more and more electrons. This can be cartooned in this way. We have light energy smacking this this teeter-totter, energizing an electron. It shoots up to an electron acceptor. Then that electron goes down the transport chain, making ATP. It loses energy along the way. It gets re-energized by more light. It goes up to another electron acceptor and is used then to make NADPH. That's another way to think about this process. So before we move on, let me just go ahead and draw this, and then we'll end this video and start a new video. So let me insert a new slide. This is something I'd like you to be able to draw. So this is known as a Z-scheme of photosynthesis. So you start by taking a letter Z and kind of knocking it over. It's not a perfect letter Z, but there it is, okay? And so this is just the progress of the reaction, and this is basically free energy, so energy, right? So if you think of this as a graph. Now this is going to represent photosystem 2. This is photosystem 1. And so what we have here are electrons, so we have light energy coming in. Photosystem 2 absorbs light, and those electrons gain energy and they go to an electron acceptor, EA. Then those electrons go down the ETC and they come back down here to photosystem 1. So this was P700, right? And this was P680. That's the reaction center, the wavelengths of light they absorb the best. Electrons are energized again and go to another electron acceptor. And then they go down a very short electron transport chain here, and NADPH is made. And so ATP is made here, and we'll look at that in more detail. But this is the basic map of what's happening in terms of energy. You also have to realize where this is. This is in the thylakoid membrane, and you know, photosystem 2 is that molecule we talked about. It's a photosystem. It has a reaction center complex and light harvesting complex. And photosystem 1 also has those parts. They're just slightly different complexes that absorb slightly different wavelengths. But this is what's happening. You can draw this quite easily to help make sense of what's going on. Okay? In the next video, we're going to look at that in a little more detail to really map out what is happening in these processes.